All right, why don't we begin now with panel 7, another coal panel.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Randy Vanartsen. I'm the Director of Fuel Supply for We Energies. Thank you, Chairman Elliott, Vice Chair Miller, and Commissioner Begman for the opportunity to speak today. And thank you to the STB staff for arranging this hearing. We Energies is an investor-owned utility providing electricity to approximately 2.2 million wholesale and retail customers in Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We operate 4 coal-fired power plants, 2 of which are rail-served and 2 of which are served by lake vessel with coal initially delivered by rail to the docks, which are on Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. The rail-served plants are the Pleasant Prairie plant near Kenosha, Wisconsin, and the Oak Creek plant near Milwaukee. The water-served plants are the Valley plant in Milwaukee and the Presque plant near Marquette, Michigan. The Presque plant burns Montana and Wyoming PRB coal originated by the Bnsf and transported on Bnsf's northern corridor to the Merck dock at Superior, Wisconsin, where it's transferred to vessels with delivery of the coal to the plant on Lake Superior. I share the concerns that have already been expressed, but I want to focus my discussion today on the Bnsf rail service for the Presque plant. Coal is ultimately delivered to Presque by lake vessel, and the vessels cannot operate during the winter months when the northern Great Lakes are closed to shipping. This means we must have a sufficient inventory of coal at the plant by the end of each year to be able to provide reliable generation during the winter and early spring when coal can't be delivered. The Presque plant has 5 generating units operated by We Energies at the direction of the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, MISO. 4 of these units are supposed to operate 24/7 to maintain the reliability of the electric system in Michigan's Upper Peninsula and in northern Wisconsin. BNSF's slow rail service is jeopardizing reliable operation of these units, and the problem is expected to get worse this coming winter. We nominated a total of 1.5 million tons of coal for movement to Presque in 2014, but at the present rate of deliveries by BNSF, it now appears that less than 1 million tons will be delivered this year. Historically, we've varied between 2 and 3 unit train sets in BNSF service between the PRB mines in Superior, Wisconsin. This year, BNSF initially limited us to 1 set in service, exacerbating an already difficult inventory situation at our Presque plant. Then they allowed a 2nd set to return to service in April. Due to congestion on BNSF's northern tier lines, train cycle times have increased from an average of less than 7 days prior to the fall of 2013 to an average of about 10 days thus far in 2014. We've repeatedly asked BNSF to allow us to put a 3rd train set into this service. Although they indicated several months ago they would do this, BNSF has not yet allowed an additional train set due to the congestion on its northern corridor. However, we believe that they have increased the number of train sets in service to Superior for other customers. The Presque inventory target for December 31st, 2014, which is the traditional close of the vessel shipping season, is 650,000 tons of coal. That level of inventory is needed to enable the plant to operate during the winter months when it cannot receive coal. As of mid-August, the inventory at the plant was less than 250,000 tons. To build up to the December 31st minimum inventory target while meeting coal consumption projections for the rest of this year, the Merck dock at Superior needs to receive 750,000 tons more via BNSF between now and the end of the year. Current cycle times with 2 We Energies train sets in service will not achieve this volume. Due to the projected shortfall in coal deliveries, which we have not been able to fully mitigate through extraordinary attempts to procure coal from other sources, MISO has had to significantly restrict the operations of Presque in order to conserve the limited coal inventory. This restricted operation is expected to be in place through next spring if we do not receive significantly more coal delivered to the Merck dock by BNSF. Presque Isle is the only large generating facility in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, so restricted operation at this plant will threaten electric system reliability with the concomitant risk that the Upper Peninsula will go dark this winter. In conclusion, we urge the STB to do everything in its power to encourage BNSF to increase coal deliveries to Superior for Presque Isle for the remainder of 2014. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Barker?
Good afternoon. My name is Theodore Barker. I'm president of MaxiFish LLC. We are a third-party logistics company providing shipping services to grain, fertilizer, and industrial product shippers and coal shippers throughout North America and internationally. I am appearing this afternoon on behalf of Muscatine Power and Water, who has a generation facility in Muscatine, Iowa. They have their history is that back in the early 90s, they received their coal for their facility from the Illinois Basin. But in 1992, they made a decision to beginning receiving coal from the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. And at that time, they did not have rail access at the facility in Muscatine, Iowa. And so what they did is they had a spur built into the plant, and it happens that Muscatine, Iowa at that time was served by Canadian Pacific. And so the service started in 1993, and they've had a nice long-term relationship with Canadian Pacific. In 1994, they went out and bought their first of 2 train sets that moved their coal between Wyoming and Iowa. The second set was purchased in 1998. Now, when cycle times are normal, which is roughly 7 days, each train set should have the capacity to deliver 750,000 tons each into the Muscatine plant. Historically, Muscatine burns on average about 1.1 million tons. Last few years, beginning in 2009, it has fallen off a little bit, but overall, it's pretty consistent. But what has come about is since after they began shipping in the early 90s from Wyoming, the CP spun off the line that serves Muscatine, Iowa, to what it was the Iowa, Chicago, and Eastern Railroad. In the fourth quarter of 2009, the Canadian Pacific reacquired the ICE and began service again into Muscatine, Iowa. And we had, during the time that IC&E served the facility, the goal has always been that they receive the trains from BNSF in Ottumwa, Iowa. And the IC&E would deliver the trains up to, from Ottumwa to Muscatine, and then after Muscatine unloads the trains, they're returned back to Ottumwa. And the goal is always, by the railroad, has always been it should take about 24 hours to deliver the trains to the plant, and then after the plant unloads the trains, return the train back to Ottumwa and interchange it back to Bnsf. After Canadian Pacific reacquired the IC&E in 2009, we saw the cycle times begin to deteriorate. And they reached a point in 2010 where we communicated with Canadian Pacific and asked if they could come to Muscatine, Iowa, and sit down with us and give us what their plan was for serving the facility going forward into the future. And so they came to Muscatine, Iowa in August of 2010, and at that meeting was John Brooks, who spoke earlier this morning on behalf of Canadian Pacific. And at the meeting, John said that one of their issues they were facing at that time was the amount of crews that they are needed to move all the trains moving through that corridor. And he said that they were in the midst of hiring crews and getting them trained, but it was not going to be a quick fix. So we said, okay, that's fine, we'll be patient. And after that meeting in August of 2010, things improved. But beginning in roughly late 2013, things began to deteriorate, and when you communicate with the Canadian Pacific Operations Department, their standard response was, well, it's a crew issue, and we're hiring crews, and things are going to get better. And but into 14 and into the third quarter now of 2014, things have just gotten worse and worse, where, like I said a few minutes ago, the goal is 24 hours. Why in the third quarter, as of last week, it's now up to over 71 hours it takes to go make a round trip of 166 miles from Ottumwa to Muscatine and back. And 2 weeks ago, in August, it got so bad that one train, it took over 121 hours to make that trip. And it was due totally tied to not available, CP not having the crews available that they need to move the trains. Their response is that crews, because they have to mark up that they're willing to come to work, sometimes just choose not to sign up that particular day, and it's really an issue on weekends. We are now have come to the realization that we rarely expect to get trains delivered on weekends anymore until this situation gets resolved. And even during the week, it's been a problem. In July, Muscatine had to take preservation steps because our stockpile was getting so low that we did not want to run out of coal. And so what they have done is they had to cut back their burn rate in order to keep the stockpile from reaching zero. And the result of that is in the months of July and August, Muscatine has lost in wholesale power sales $619,000 due to not having the coal that they had. Had it been delivered by Canadian Pacific, they would be able to have generated that money for wholesale power sales. And after it's been now 4 years since we had that meeting with the CP in 2010, a reasonable person would conclude that they should have enough crews trained by now to handle whatever number of trains that are moving between Ottumwa and Nahant, Iowa, which is a crew change point just to the east of Muscatine, Iowa. And But we've now reached the conclusion that if cycle times do not improve from where they are right now, that we are not going to get our nominated tons delivered by December 31st of this year if things do not improve from where they are this afternoon. And our real concern is coming in 2015, where we need to have delivered 1.1 million tons in order for our generation needs and for to rebuild the stockpile to a level that that is reliable for generation. And given the cycle times that we are experiencing currently, we expect next year, if things do not improve, we will only get 950,000 of the 1.1 million tons. I want to thank the board, Chairman Elliott and Vice Chairman Miller and Commissioner Begeman for this time to explain the situation, and we would encourage the board to, see if you can encourage CP to follow through with their plan, which they said again this morning, which is hiring train crews to handle their business, but specifically handle it in this area, which is away from what they talked about this morning, which is North Dakota. But still, it's their whole system, and given their attrition that they talked about this morning, it becomes even a real more concern to us on the amount of crews that they really need to get trained to handle our trains. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Jim Sire with Glacial Lakes Energy. I am not Dana Sifkis Lewis, but I have been asked by Dana to read her testimony. She could not be here. Regrettably, there was a tragedy at that ethanol plant, and they had to attend to that today. So Glacial Lakes Energy and Redfield Energy are located, well, we have two plants. They have one. There's a 70-mile difference between Watertown, Redfield, and then a 40-mile difference between Redfield and Mina. So they're kind of sit between us. We own 8% of Redfield Energy. So here's, with that, here's Dana's testimony. My name is Dana Lewis. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for Redfield Energy. I want to thank the Surface Transportation Board for conducting this public hearing to seek input from affected rail shippers. Redfield Energy was built as a 50 million gallon per year ethanol plant. First production began in late April 2007. With plant modifications and other efficiencies, we are capable today of producing 60 million gallons per year. We provide a good market for area corn producers. In calendar year 2013, we produced 57.9 million gallons of ethanol and used 20.7 million bushels of corn. In addition, we produced 103,000 tons of dried distiller grains and 130,000 tons of modified distiller grains. Most of this feed product is marketed to local cattle producers. Redfield Energy has 42 employees. For most of 2014, Redfield Energy has been running its plants at a lower than planned production run rate due to slower rail turns on ethanol tankers. During our recent fiscal year ending August 31st, 2014, we produced 53.9 million gallons of ethanol. This is down nearly 6% from the 57.1 million gallons produced in our prior fiscal year. Bnsf serves our plant as the only rail service provider. I will note some of the other impacts the poor rail service has had on Redfield Energy and what we are doing to prepare for similar conditions going into this next year. Number one, longer return times for ethanol tankers and dry distiller grain hopper cars caused us to buy some spot product at higher market prices to fulfill commitments made prior to the rail service deterioration. This in turn had a negative impact to profit margins. Number two, managing logistics has been a nightmare for the marketing of our feed byproducts. Even truck sales were impacted as we produced less modified and distiller grain for local livestock producers. Winter is our high demand period for feed byproducts. In the summer, if hopper cars don't show up, we need to sell feed products to local markets at deep discounts to keep the plant running. We lease and carry a higher number of tankers than most plants our size. Going into this past winter, we had 198 ethanol tankers under lease. At planned normal production, we would fill 40 tanker cars per week. Historically, rail turns on the tankers was roughly 4 weeks. We are seeing our rail turns averaging about 7 weeks per car. In the next few months, we will have our fleet of tanker cars up to 233 cars. This is an additional monthly lease cost burden to Redfield Energy. We are a rail customer that historically received 3 days a week service from Bnsf. During most of 2014, we have been averaging 2 days a week service. Slower destination dwell times only add to the slower return times of cars. Number 4, during the past 31 weeks, we have filled an average 33 ethanol tankers per week. We filled them as fast as they were returned to us. As stated earlier, at full production, we would expect to ship 40 cars per week. During the first quarter of 2014, we loaded 454 tanker cars. This is down 9% from the 500 cars shipped during the first quarter of last year. After its April hearing in D.C., the Surface Transportation Board asked the railroads to put a higher priority on fertilizer shipments. After that, the railroads were asked to do what they could to catch up on all the grain orders. As a value-added ag entity, we are okay with these shipment priorities. Our producers need to get the fertilizer in order to ensure a better crop and yield, plus catching up on grain shipments meant that there would be less congestion this fall. It appears we are going to have a good corn and soybean crop in the U.S. We did experience even slower car returns during the second quarter of 2014 compared to the first quarter. We shipped 415 tankers during the second quarter, down from 454 tankers during the first quarter. During the second quarter of 2013, we shipped 528 tanker cars, so second quarter 2014 shipments were down over 20% from a year ago. Number 7, because of the unknowns associated with not knowing when rail cars would return, it was hard to pre-sell product to customers at fixed prices due to potential plant slowdowns or shutdowns. Again, the risk of not being able to fulfill a contract due to the longer turn times on the rail cars can be costly. Number 8, because of these rail issues, we are spending a significant investment in additional on-site ethanol storage. We are adding 2 million gallons of additional storage to our current 1.5 million gallons. We can't afford to shut the plant down for any extended period of time in sub-freezing temperatures. As we head into the next harvest season and year, no one knows for sure where rail service issues may lie. Redfield Energy has taken some necessary steps to keep its plant running if rail service issues persist. We simply can't afford to shut down our plant in extremely cold winter conditions. Severe damage will occur if the plant is not running for any length of time. We applaud the Surface Transportation Board's effort to keep the railroads providing a better level of service. Thank you, Dana Sifkis Lewis, Chief Administrative Officer, Redfield Energy. Okay, so now for my testimony. My name is Jim Sire. I am the CEO of Glacial Lakes Energy. Glacial Lakes Energy is a South Dakota-based ethanol production cooperative owned by 4,100 corn producers and Main Street investors who reside primarily in eastern South Dakota. But we also have investors and do business in southern North Dakota and western Minnesota. We own and operate 2 large fuel ethanol production facilities, one in Watertown, South Dakota, and one in Mina, South Dakota, which is west of Aberdeen. In aggregate, our plants produce more than 230 million gallons of fuel ethanol and 750,000 tons of dry distiller grains annually. Although we buy 85 million bushels of corn, locally grown corn, which is trucked into our plants, we ship nearly every gallon of ethanol and the majority of our distiller grain tons via rail. Both of our plants are completely dependent upon and captive to one railroad, the Bnsf. Our Watertown plant is a single-car manifest facility, while our Mina plant has unit train capability. The level of service we have received from the Bnsf has been in a downward spiral since last fall. Like many others here today, we have suffered slowdowns and shutdowns. We have lost revenue, we have missed opportunities, and we have incurred higher costs because of the Bnsf's mismanagement of its monopolistic workload. Over time, we have met with Bnsf officials at various locations such as Minneapolis, Orlando, and Fort Worth to request an explanation for this poor service and to discuss with them how we could best position ourselves to manage what appears to be the new norm. During these meetings, there has been much discussion around the idea that the Bnsf would prefer and is incenting shippers such as ourselves to move toward unit train capability to improve efficiency and lower its costs. As a result, and since we currently have such capability in Mina, we are in the process of taking a serious look at whether we should move this direction in Watertown. This is an undertaking that we estimate could come with a price tag upwards of $15 million, or perhaps more. However, we remain concerned about the level of service we might receive even if we move this direction and make this investment. Why? Because we recently experienced a situation where 2 fully loaded ethanol unit trains were parked for 4 and 5 days en route to their California and Texas destinations. This caused us a 4-day shutdown at our Mina plant, which came at a significant cost in lost earnings. More concerning is that with South Dakota's harsh winters, we could not take such a hit in the winter without a complete freeze-up of our plant. So I ask, how can we justify an investment in a unit track to our investors if the service level provided by the Bnsf remains as weak as it is? As mentioned previously, and speaking on behalf of the entire industry, the majority of us do not have the capability to store production for more than several days. We are a very real-time business, and our production must be carried away in a timely and efficient manner. While we appreciate the efforts that have been made by the Surface Transportation Board thus far, we urge the board and the Bnsf and other railroads to step up, bite the bullet, and double or even triple your investment in labor, equipment, and infrastructure, so that a real difference can be felt by those of us in the grain industry who have been your bread and butter for the past several decades. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. One question with respect to power companies. How much effect do you think this the service has had on the amount that are paid by your consumers? I mean, has that had a significant effect on what people are paying for electricity?
Yes, it has. I'm sorry. Yes, it has. I think a couple of people have touched on that earlier, where as our inventories get lower and become dangerous levels, then we will conserve coal by favoring higher cost power plants somewhere else. Our unique situation at our Presque plant is there's very limited ability to do even that because it's kind of out on an island out there. I think other people have shared numbers in the millions of dollars. I'm sure that it's been, I haven't run the numbers, but I'm sure there's been millions of dollars of costs for us too across our system.
I might be a little more bold than that. I'm listening to all the testimony and the individual amounts. I might venture to say that you start adding up the millions and they become hundreds of millions. They might even be more than that in terms of losses to agriculture, to the coal industry, to every other testimony that was made here this day. As far as ethanol, I can share that some of the pricing we saw on our product that was going to the East Coast that had to go through Chicago was tremendous. We did not send product to New York Harbor because it was going to go through Chicago. It was tempting, but for what could be a 6 to 8 week turn, we were not willing to take that risk, so we would find other markets. I don't know what the prices of gasoline at the pump were at that time in the Northeast, but I'm sure it was adding to the consumer's expense.
Thank you. Vice Chairman?
I think I just have one for you, Jim, and I may have missed it since you were multitasking for Redfield as well. Have you had to shut down at any point?
We've had a couple of periods of shutdown, and interestingly enough, it's been both at the single car and the unit train facility. And again, I know there's some tension in the room about, well, should unit trains receive priority or not? The Bnsf, other railroads see that as a way to become more efficient. And we would like to all think that, well, some of that efficiency will work its way back to the single car manifest facilities. I'm not sure if that's the case, especially when I hear that there are hundreds of employees down. I would think if there's less employee involvement, more efficiency, then they'd be able to shift folks elsewhere. But no, we've suffered shutdowns, slowdowns. When we see that the cars aren't coming back, we'll start to slow down. Speaking on behalf of Redfield, I think they just chose to run at about an 80 to 90% capacity throughout the summer, and spring and summer. We were maybe a little more bold over at Glacial Lakes Energy. We rolled the dice a few times and didn't come up winners. And when the 2 unit trains parked themselves for 4 and 5 days, that caught us. And there was 4 days there that we had to take the plant down and wait for the trains to come back. And who knows what happened during those 4 or 5 days. I suspect that the power was pulled off and moved somewhere else, and so it didn't meet our expectations of what a unit train service should be. So yes, and again, as Dana pointed out in her letter, as I'm well aware, when we get to winter and these plants are full of fluids and liquids moving around, pipes, as long as that fluid and liquid keeps moving when it's 20, 30 below, we're okay. But when it slows down or stops, then that's when the problems begin. And I hope I never have to see all sorts of pipes all frozen solid and split. And I mean, it's going to be a real mess.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming out today.
Thank you.